if you've ever starved yourself for a couple of days, like on one of those crash diets, and then you stepped on the bathroom scale and just celebrated losing, I don't know, 2.5 kilos.
Oh, yeah, the classic 2-day fast victory.
Right. But I have some terrible news for you. Because you didn't burn a single ounce of body fat.
Not a drop.
You didn't miraculously speed up your metabolism either. You basically just, well, you squeezed out your body's internal biological sponge.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, a sponge.
And the absolute worst part, the moment you eat a sandwich, every single gram of that weight is coming right back.
It really is. I mean, it's one of the most persistent and honestly psychologically damaging illusions in modern diet culture.
Seriously.
People base entire lifestyle regimens on this fundamental misunderstanding of cellular chemistry, and water binding. We interpret this temporary shift in hydration as this massive victory over our body fat.
Right, like we finally beat the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which just leads to this endless, frustrating cycle of crash dieting and then binging and then feeling like a failure.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Because today, we are stripping away all that generic magazine-covered diet advice.
Let's get into the actual science.
Yeah, we are looking at the literal physical machinery of human metabolism. And our lens for this, our source material today, is a really highly detailed course article on carbohydrate metabolism.
And from the My-Nutri-Diary app, right?
Yes, exactly. And the mission today is to trace the exact journey of a carbohydrate, from the moment it enters your mouth down to the microscopic cellular receptors that either turn it into the electrical energy powering your brain right now,
or, unfortunately, convert it into the lipid droplets that slowly suffocate your internal organs.
Yikes, yeah, we're definitely getting into that darker side later.
I mean, what's particularly valuable about this specific material is how it separates the different types of sugars.
Because we just lump them all together usually, right?
We do. We tend to treat all carbohydrates as this one monolithic category. We say, carbs give you energy or carbs make you fat.
The dreaded carb.
Exactly. But the biochemical reality is that your liver treats a molecule of glucose completely differently than it treats a molecule of fructose.
Wait, really? Even though they're both just sugar?
Completely differently. One is basically granted a VIP pass to circulate through your entire body and keep your consciousness intact.
And the other?
The other is treated almost like a metabolic toxin. The liver feels it has to quarantine and neutralize it, often at a terrible cost to its own tissue.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack this from the very beginning. The intake. I like to think of it as a biological disassembly line.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Thanks. So the basic premise in the source is that carbohydrates are an essential energy source, and they primarily come from plant-based foods.
Right.
But before we even get into the human anatomy side of things, we really need to understand what we are actually eating. Like when you eat a potato or a bowl of rice, what is that carbohydrate on a molecular level?
Well, at its most fundamental level, and this sounds almost poetic, but you are eating captured sunlight.
Captured sunlight. I love that.
It's true. I mean, plants perform photosynthesis. They take carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, and they use the energy of the sun to literally bind them together into sugar molecules.
So they're building their own food from the air and the sun.
Yes. But a plant doesn't want to just leave loose sugar floating around in its leaves. It needs to store that energy for its own use later, or for its seeds, or to survive the winter.
So what does it do with the loose sugar?
It links those single sugar molecules together into massive, highly complex chains. And these long chains of bound up sugars, that is what we call starches.
Okay, so a starch is basically just a highly compressed biological battery that the plant built for itself.
Perfect way to look at it.
But when I eat that potato, my body can't actually do anything with that massive chain, right?
No, absolutely not. Your cells are way too small. And our metabolic machinery just isn't designed to process a giant starch polymer whole.
So the entire purpose of the human digestive tract, then, is to break those chemical bonds, to strip that complex starch back down into the individual single sugar molecules.
Yes. And that disassembly process begins the absolute second the food enters your mouth.
Really? Just from chewing?
Not just the mechanical chewing. Your saliva contains a specific enzyme called salivary amylase.
Salivary amylase.
Right. And it immediately starts cleaving those long chains apart while you're still chewing.
Oh, wow. So digestion literally starts in the mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then as the food moves down through the stomach and into the small intestine, the pancreas gets involved. It releases even more specialized enzymes to keep chopping those chains up.
So the disassembly line is just hitting it at every stage.
Basically, by the time that meal reaches what we call the brush border,
Wait, what's the brush border?
it's the microvilli. These tiny finger-like projections lining the walls of your small intestine. By the time the food gets there, those massive starch batteries have been completely disassembled.
Okay, so the complex chains are totally gone at this point.
Right. What remains are just the smallest possible units of carbohydrate energy. We call these monosaccharides.
Monosaccharides. Let's break that word down.
Sure. Mono, meaning one, and saccharide, meaning sugar. Single sugars.
Okay, and the source material specifies that we end up with 3 primary simple sugars at the end of this line.
Right, the big three.
Glucose, fructose, and galactose.
Exactly, and because they are now single sugars, they are physically small enough to pass right through the intestinal wall and enter your bloodstream.
But they don't just, dump into the general blood supply and flow straight to the heart, do they?
No, they don't, and this is a crucial point. There is a very specific anatomical detour they have to take first.
The portal vein.
Yes. They get routed entirely through the portal vein.
Which is such a fascinating piece of anatomy. I mean, the portal vein is incredibly unique, vascularly speaking.
And it really is. Because in most parts of the body, right, arteries pump oxygen-rich blood to an organ, and then veins carry the depleted blood straight back to the heart.
But the gut works differently.
Completely differently. All the veins draining your entire digestive tract, they all merge together to form this one massive pipe, the portal vein.
And it doesn't go to the heart.
Nope. It plugs directly into the liver.
So it's a dedicated biological supply chain. The liver gets the very first look at absolutely everything we absorb.
Exactly. In pharmacology and biology, we call this first-pass metabolism.
First pass. I like that.
Yeah, think of the liver as the central triage facility, or like a heavy-duty border checkpoint for the human body.
So before anything gets to the brain or the heart, it has to clear customs at the liver.
Exactly. Before any nutrient, any medication you take, or any potential toxin from your food is allowed into the general circulation, the liver inspects it.
How does it actually do that?
Well, the blood flowing from the portal vein enters these tiny functional units in the liver called hepatic lobules.
Somatic lobules, okay.
Right. And inside there, millions of liver cells, hepatocytes, are essentially bathing in this nutrient-rich blood, and they just begin processing whatever is in it.
And this is where the major divergence happens, right? This is the most critical part of this early digestive phase.
It really is.
Because we have these 3 sugars, glucose, fructose, and galactose. They all arrived at the liver through the portal vein. They all came from the exact same meal.
Right, from the same potato or piece of fruit.
And chemically, they are very similar, yet the liver discriminates between them immediately.
Instantly.
The material points out that the liver just waves glucose right through. Like, go ahead, pass into the general bloodstream.
VIP access.
Right. But it traps the fructose and the galactose. It pulls them out of the blood to process them internally. So my question is, why does glucose get the free pass?
Well, it all comes down to millions of years of evolutionary biochemistry.
Okay, let's hear it.
Glucose is the foundational fuel for almost all life on Earth. I mean, from bacteria to plants to humans.
The universal fuel.
Exactly. Over deep time, the human body evolved to rely on glucose as its primary universal energy currency. Because of this, virtually every single cell in your body, muscle cells, fat cells, kidney cells, neurons in your brain, they all possess the specific enzymatic machinery required to pull glucose out of the blood and burn it.
So they're all equipped to handle it.
Yes. Specifically, they have an enzyme called hexokinase.
Hexokinase.
Right. And hexokinase is what physically traps the glucose inside the cell so it could be used.
Okay, so glucose is essentially a universally recognized key. It fits the locks on every cell in the body.
That's a perfect analogy.
And the liver knows this, so it lets the glucose flow out into the systemic circulation because it knows the rest of the body is out there waiting for it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But fructose and galactose, they do not fit those locks.
Oh, interesting. So my bicep can't use fructose.
Not directly, no. A muscle cell does not have the robust enzymatic setup to efficiently grab fructose out of the blood and convert it into usable energy.
Huh.
So if the liver just let the fructose float past it into the general circulation, it would largely be useless to the rest of the tissues.
Just dead weight in the blood.
Worse than dead weight, actually.
Yeah.
High concentrations of fructose in the systemic blood can actually be toxic.
Wait, toxic? How?
Because of a process called glycation. It's where these loose sugar molecules haphazardly bind to proteins in your blood and damage them.
Oh, Oh, wow. So the liver is protecting the body by stopping it.
Exactly. The liver is the only organ with high levels of fructokinase, the specific enzyme that processes fructose. So it absorbs almost all of it immediately upon arrival to keep the blood clean.
Okay, we are definitely going to dive deep into the darker side of how the liver handles that trapped fructose later.
Oh, we have to. It's a huge issue in modern diets.
But first, let's follow the path of the universal fuel, the glucose.
Let's do it.
So the glucose gets the VIP pass, it passes through the liver, enters the vena cava, hits the heart, and is pumped out to the entire body.
Right.
The article emphasizes over and over that glucose is the most important simple sugar for the human organism. It must be permanently available in the blood. So what exactly is a cell doing with it once it actually absorbs it? Let's say a muscle cell grabs a glucose molecule. What happens?
Once glucose enters a cell, it undergoes a process called glycolysis.
Glycolysis. Okay, I know biochemistry can get incredibly dense, so let's try to keep it simple for everyone listening.
Sure. The core concept of glycolysis is actually pretty straightforward. Glyco, meaning sugar, and lysis, meaning to break apart.
To break the sugar apart.
Exactly. The cell takes this 6-carbon molecule of glucose, and through a series of 10 specific enzymatic steps, it literally snaps it in half.
It breaks the molecule.
Yes. It snaps it into 2 3-carbon molecules. These are called pyruvate.
Okay, so you break the stick in half. Where does the energy come from?
Breaking those chemical bonds releases a small amount of usable energy, and the cell immediately captures that energy in the form of ATP.
Ah, ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
That's the one.
ATP is the actual literal microscopic battery, right? Like when my muscle fiber contracts or when a nerve cell in my brain fires, it's burning ATP. It's not burning the glucose directly.
Precisely. The glucose is just the raw material. It's the coal you shovel into the furnace to manufacture the ATP.
Got it.
And while that initial splitting, the glycolysis,
Yeah.
provides some immediate ATP, those 2 halves, the pyruvate molecules,
Yeah.
they can then be fed into the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell.
The classic middle school biology phrase, the powerhouse of the cell.
And then we never forget it. So inside the mitochondria, they undergo oxidative phosphorylation, which requires oxygen, and that produces a massive amount of ATP.
So that is literally how human beings move, think, and generate body heat.
Yeah.
Continuous splitting of glucose.
Yes, millions of times a second, all over your body.
Okay, but while you mentioned that all cells can use glucose, the source material really zones in on 2 specific types of cells that are absolutely 100% reliant on it.
Right, the non-negotiables.
Red blood cells and brain cells.
Exactly.
My question is, why are they so vulnerable compared to, say, my bicep muscle? Because if I'm starving, my bicep can just switch over and burn body fat for fuel, right? Why can't my brain do that?
It's a great question. The brain is a highly protected, highly specialized organ. You have to remember, to keep pathogens and toxins out of your central nervous system, your body evolved the blood-brain barrier.
Right, the security firewall for the brain.
Exactly. It's a tightly packed layer of endothelial cells that strictly regulates what can cross from your blood into your brain tissue.
Okay, so where do the fats get stopped?
Well, fatty acids, which are the breakdown products of body fat, are very large, bulky molecules. And in the blood, they don't just float freely, they have to be transported by carrier proteins like albumin.
So it's like a big cargo ship carrying the fat.
Exactly. And this massive complex of fat and protein simply cannot cross the blood-brain barrier efficiently. It's too big to fit through the security gates.
Oh, wow. So even if you have like 50 pounds of excess body fat on you, your brain literally cannot access it directly for fuel?
It cannot. Furthermore, even if those fatty acids could cross easily, metabolizing fat requires much more oxygen than metabolizing glucose, and it produces a higher amount of reactive oxygen species, what we call free radicals.
Oh, the stuff that damages cells.
Right. And the brain is incredibly susceptible to oxidative stress. So burning fat for fuel directly inside your neurons would be like, well, it would be like burning highly polluting coal inside a delicate sealed greenhouse.
It would just coat everything in soot and damage the tissue.
Exactly. It would degrade the neurons. So the brain is evolutionarily locked into relying almost entirely on glucose.
Because glucose burns clean.
It burns clean, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier extremely rapidly via these specialized transport proteins called GLUT1 receptors.
Okay, so the brain is locked in. What about the red blood cells? You said they also need glucose exclusively.
Red blood cells have a totally different limitation. They literally lack mitochondria entirely.
Wait, what? They don't have the powerhouse of the cell.
They don't. They eject their mitochondria as they mature, so they have more room to carry oxygen.
Oh, that's wild. I never knew that.
So because they have no mitochondria, they physically can't burn fat at all. They rely 100% on the basic process of glycolysis.
Just snapping the sugar in half in the main fluid of the cell.
Exactly.
But this absolute dependence creates this terrifying biological vulnerability, doesn't it?
It does. It's a huge risk.
If the brain can't burn fat and it relies on a constant, steady stream of glucose, the body has to make absolutely sure that stream never runs dry.
It's the body's top priority.
And the margin for error is shockingly narrow. I was reading this part of the text and I was blown away. It states that a healthy human body tries to maintain the blood sugar level strictly between 70 and 110 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood.
Yes, that is the safe zone.
Can we translate those numbers into a physical reality for the listener? Because 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter sounds very abstract. Let's make it visual.
We definitely should. Okay, so the average human adult has about 5 liters of blood circulating in their entire vascular system.
5 liters. Like 2.5 large soda bottles.
Right. Now, if you take that ideal concentration, that 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter, and you multiply it across all 5 liters of blood,
What's the total?
you find that at any given moment, there's only about 4 to 5 grams of glucose dissolved in the entirety of your blood.
4 grams. That is roughly a single teaspoon of sugar.
Exactly 1 teaspoon.
That is insane. 1 single teaspoon of sugar, constantly circulating, heavily diluted across 5 liters of fluid. That is the entire buffer protecting my consciousness right now.
That is the whole buffer. If that concentration drops much below 70 milligrams, say it goes down to 50 or 40, you enter a state of hypoglycemia.
And what happens then?
The brain instantly senses the ATP production faltering. You experience cognitive impairment, confusion, tremors, a loss of coordination.
I mean, we've all felt mild versions of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. And eventually, if the fuel doesn't arrive, it leads to seizures, coma, and death. The brain simply shuts off to protect itself.
You know, it's funny. Anyone who has ever skipped breakfast and then tried to sit through a complex meeting at like 2:00 p.m. knows the feeling.
The 2 p.m. slump.
Yes, the brain fog, the irritability, the sudden inability to remember a specific word. We usually just brush it off as being tired.
Or needing coffee.
Right. But biologically, what's happening is your brain is literally detecting a dip in that single teaspoon of circulating glucose, and it is sounding a neurometabolic alarm.
It is rationing power. It's shutting down non-essential cognitive functions to keep the core systems running.
Okay, so that's the danger of going too low, but you can't just dump 10 teaspoons of sugar into the blood to create a giant safety buffer either.
No, absolutely not. If the concentration rises too high, if it's consistently above that 110 milligram threshold, the glucose actually becomes toxic.
Just from floating there.
Yes, it damages the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. This is exactly what leads to the severe complications we see in uncontrolled diabetes.
Like blindness and kidney failure.
Blindness, kidney failure, neuropathy, amputations. The high sugar literally shreds the microcapillaries.
So the body is basically walking an evolutionary tightrope every second of your life.
Yeah.
It must stay perfectly between 70 and 110.
It is a phenomenal balancing act.
But here's the thing. I'm rarely sitting perfectly still in a controlled environment.
Right.
I might eat an entire pizza, which floods the system with massive amounts of glucose all at once.
Right.
Or conversely, I might go run 10 kilometers in a fasted state, which drains the glucose out of the blood rapidly.
A huge outflow.
Maintaining a constant level on an undulating highway like that, it requires an incredibly advanced cruise control system.
That's a perfect analogy.
There has to be a physical mechanism that is constantly sampling the blood and adjusting the throttle and the brakes.
Yeah.
What is that mechanism?
That biological cruise control system is your pancreas.
The pancreas.
Yes, it's a glandular organ tucked right behind the lower part of your stomach.
Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes into the gut.
It does. That's its exocrine function. But it also has scattered clusters of dedicated endocrine tissue. They're called the islets of Langerhans.
The islets of Langerhans sounds like a fantasy novel location.
It really does. But these little islets are essentially real-time blood analysis laboratories.
How do they work?
They are constantly, second by second, measuring the exact concentration of glucose in the blood that passes through them.
Okay, let's break down the bricks first. What happens when the blood sugar spikes? You eat that plate of pasta, the disassembly line breaks it down, the portal vein rushes it to the liver waves it through.
And suddenly your blood sugar surges toward 140 or 150 milligrams per deciliter.
Right. How do the brakes apply?
the specific cells inside those islets, called the beta cells, detect that spike instantly.
Beta cells.
Right. And the mechanism is just fascinating. As the excess glucose enters the beta cell, it ramps up the cell's ATP production.
Okay, making more energy.
Yes. And this sudden rise in cellular energy triggers a physical change in the cell membrane. It closes these little potassium channels.
Which does what?
It alters the electrical charge of the whole cell, which then pops open calcium channels.
Oh, wow. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine.
Exactly. And the influx of calcium causes the beta cell to physically push these little vesicles filled with a hormone out into the blood.
And that hormone is?
Insulin.
Insulin. Probably the single most talked about and misunderstood hormone in mainstream nutrition.
Without a doubt.
Because people often think insulin, destroys the sugar in your blood, like an acid dissolving it or something.
I hear that all the time. But it doesn't destroy anything.
It simply moves it.
Correct. Insulin is a signaling molecule. It's a cellular key.
Okay, explain how the key works.
Well, while the brain can absorb glucose freely, it doesn't need insulin. Most of the cells in your mass, specifically your skeletal muscles and your adipose tissue, your fat cells,
Yeah.
they have a locked membrane. They contain glucose transporters, specifically these ones called GLUT4 transporters. But those transporters are kept inside the cell, deep away from the surface.
So the glucose is just floating right past the muscle fiber in the blood, but the muscle fiber can't reach out and grab it.
Exactly, until insulin arrives.
Uh-huh.
Insulin flows in the blood, and it binds to a specific receptor on the outer wall of the muscle or fat cell.
It turns the key.
It turns the key. This binding triggers a huge, complex cascade of chemical signals inside the cell, ultimately instructing those internal GLUT4 transporters to migrate all the way to the surface and embed themselves in the cell membrane.
They essentially open the doors.
Exactly, they open the doors. And only then can the glucose rush out of the bloodstream and into the tissue.
So insulin is literally sweeping the bloodstream clean. It's pushing the glucose into the muscles and the fat, which lowers the blood concentration right back down into that safe 70 to 110 range.
The cruise control applies the brakes successfully.
Wow. Okay, but once the glucose is pushed into the muscle cell, the cell has to do something with it, right? Because if I'm just sitting on the couch watching a movie after eating that pasta, my muscles aren't contracting.
Right, you don't need immediate energy.
They don't need to burn the glucose for immediate ATP.
And this introduces the massive concept of biological storage.
Okay.
Insulin is fundamentally an anabolic hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Anabolic means it promotes building and storing.
Right. Like anabolic steroids build muscle.
Exactly. Insulin tells the cell, hey, we are in a state of abundance right now. Do not waste this energy. Pack it away for later.
So how does the muscle pack it away?
Inside the muscle cell and also back in the liver, the incoming glucose molecules are strung together into a highly complex branching structure. We call this stored form glycogen.
Glycogen. So glycogen is basically the temporary pantry.
Yes.
Now, we're going to dive heavily into the physical reality of that pantry in just a moment because the actual math behind it explains the entire diet industry.
Oh, it really does.
But before we get there, we have to talk about what happens when the pantry is full.
Right.
If the liver and the muscles have synthesized all the glycogen they can possibly hold, and there's still excess glucose floating around in the blood from that giant pizza,
Insulin still has to clear it. It has to find another place to put it.
where does it go?
That is when insulin forces the glucose into the adipose tissue, the fat cells.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the fat cells take up the glucose, but instead of stringing it together into glycogen, they biochemically convert it into triglycerides, or what we call depot fat.
Depot fat. So this is the body's long-term storage facility.
It's the infinite storage facility.
Yeah.
There is functionally no limit to how much depot fat you can create. It is exactly how human beings survived harsh winters and famines throughout evolution.
We convert periods of excess carbohydrates into body fat.
Exactly.
Okay, so insulin handles the spikes, it's the brakes. But what about the other side of the equation? The throttle.
The rescue mechanism.
Right. Say I'm sleeping. I haven't eaten in 10 hours. My brain is relentlessly pulling glucose out of the blood at a rate of, 5 or 6 grams an hour?
Just to keep your respiratory system and your dreams running, yeah.
So the concentration in the blood drops down dangerously close to 70. The cruise control has to kick in, or I will literally slip into a coma in my sleep.
And this is the domain of the alpha cells in the pancreas.
Alpha cells this time.
Right. As the glucose concentration drops, the beta cells completely stop producing insulin, the brakes come off, and the alpha cells spring into action.
What do they release?
They release the antagonist hormone,
Glucagon.
glucagon.
Yes. If insulin is the hormone of plenty, glucagon is the hormone of rescue.
So where does the glucagon go?
It travels straight through the blood to the liver, and it instructs the liver to do the exact opposite of what insulin did.
It tells the liver to open the pantry.
Exactly. It initiates a process called glycogenolysis.
Wait, there's that word again. Lysis means to break apart.
Right, glycogenolysis, breaking apart the stored glycogen. Glucagon binds to the liver cells and activates an enzyme that literally snips single glucose molecules off of the ends of those stored glycogen branches.
Snip, snip, snip. Exactly. And then the liver shunts this newly liberated glucose back into the systemic circulation, raising the blood sugar perfectly back into the safe zone.
So the liver is essentially just rationing out its stored pantry overnight to keep the brain fed between meals.
It's incredibly generous of the liver.
But the pantry has a bottom, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
If you fast long enough, or say you run a marathon, the liver's glycogen stores are going to hit zero. There is literally no more sugar to snip off the branches.
Right.
When the liver is entirely empty and the brain is still up there screaming for its hourly 6 grams of glucose, we face a biological wall. Does the system just fail?
It doesn't fail. The body is too smart for that. It resorts to extreme measures.
Extreme measures. What does it do?
When glycogen is fully depleted and glucagon levels remain high in the blood, that hormone triggers an incredibly energy-intensive, desperate process in the liver called gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis. Let's break that one down.
Gluco for sugar, neo for new, genesis for creation.
Creating new sugar.
The liver literally begins manufacturing brand new glucose molecules from non-carbohydrate sources.
It's building sugar from scratch. What raw materials is it using to do that?
Mostly it uses amino acids.
Wait, amino acids? That's protein.
Right. Which means the body actually begins breaking down your muscle tissue to harvest those amino acids.
Oh, wow. It's eating its own muscle to feed the brain.
It has to. It also uses glycerol, which is the backbone of the triglyceride molecules released from your fat cells. The liver takes these random components, forces the entire metabolic pathway of glycolysis to run in reverse, and chemically synthesizes glucose.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. It is a slow, difficult, highly inefficient process, but it produces just enough universal fuel to prevent the brain from starving. It is the ultimate evolutionary survival mechanism.
That is wild. The interaction between insulin and glucagon, storing and rescuing, tearing down muscle if it has to, just to protect that single circulating teaspoon of sugar. It is an absolute masterclass in biological engineering.
It really makes you respect the body.
It does, but I want to revisit the pantry now, the temporary glycogen stores.
The source of all the diet myths.
Exactly. The My-Nutri-Diary text provides some very specific, rigid numbers regarding how much glycogen a human body can actually hold. And these numbers right here are the absolute key to debunking the rapid weight loss myths we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
The physical reality of glycogen storage is perhaps the single most misunderstood concept in personal fitness, period.
People think of their energy stores as massive, right?
Yes, but the glycogen capacity is remarkably small. The material notes that the total average capacity across the entire human body is only about 600 grams.
600 grams of glycogen. Total. Let's put that in perspective. That contains roughly 2,400 kilocalories of energy.
Right.
That is basically one single day's worth of food for an average adult. If you do nothing but lie in bed and breathe, you will burn through a massive chunk of that in 24 hours.
Yeah, this has.
And the distribution of that 600 grams is also heavily skewed, right? The material says the muscles hold the vast majority, anywhere from 300 to 700 grams, depending on your muscle mass.
Well, the liver holds a maximum of about 160 grams.
Okay, but you mentioned earlier that there's a crucial functional difference between where the glycogen is stored.
There is. And this is vital. We established that the liver is altruistic, right? It uses its 160 grams to feed the entire body via glucagon signaling.
It shares.
Yes. But the muscle cells, they are entirely selfish.
Selfish? What do you mean?
Once a muscle cell pulls glucose out of the blood and synthesizes it into glycogen, that energy is locked inside that specific muscle cell forever.
Wait, really? Why can't the muscle share? If my blood sugar is plummeting, why can't my massive quads release some of their stored sugar back into the blood to help the brain?
Chemically, they can't. They lack a specific enzyme called glucose 6-phosphatase.
Glucose 6-phosphatase.
Right. Without this specific enzyme, the chemical bond trapping the glucose inside the cell cannot be broken in a way that allows it to exit the cell membrane. It is trapped.
What's the evolutionary logic there? That seems like a flaw.
It's actually brilliant for survival. Muscle tissue is designed for movement, specifically the fight or flight response. The body assumes that if you suddenly need to sprint away from a predator, your leg muscles won't have time to wait for the liver to deliver fuel through the blood.
Ah, they need it instantly.
Exactly. The muscle must have its own dedicated, locked-in supply ready to burn immediately. So the brain gets the liver's glycogen, and the muscles aggressively keep their own.
Wow. Okay, this brings us to the physics of the glycogen molecule itself, which is where the diet industry makes all its money. Let's look at the mathematics of emptying this 600-gram pantry.
Let's run the numbers.
If I decide to do a strict 2-day water fast, I stop consuming all carbohydrates. The pancreas secretes glucagon, the liver dumps its 160 grams, the muscles burn their stores, just keeping me moving, and within 48 hours, that entire 600 grams of glycogen is completely gone.
Right. You have burned 600 grams of physical mass.
Which is a little over 1 pound.
Exactly.
But anyone who has done a 2-day fast knows you don't step on the scale and see a 1-pound drop. You see a massive, immediate drop. 4, 5, sometimes 6 pounds.
The miracle weight loss.
Right. So where is that extra weight coming from if the actual glycogen only weighs 1 pound?
It comes entirely from water.
Water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Glycogen is a highly hydrophilic molecule. Hydro meaning water, philic meaning loving. It has a profound chemical affinity for water.
So it attracts water to itself.
And it binds to it. The structure of glycogen is dotted with these little hydroxyl groups, which form incredibly tight hydrogen bonds with surrounding water molecules. You cannot store glycogen as a dry, crystalline powder inside your organs. It just doesn't work. It must be stored in a fully hydrated state.
The sponge.
The sponge. The physiological rule here is absolute.
Think.
For every 1 single gram of glycogen your body synthesizes and stores, it must drag exactly 3 grams of water into the cell to hold it in suspension.
So you aren't just packing dry sugar into the liver, you are soaking a sponge.
Yeah.
For every 1 gram of sugar you push in, the sponge absorbs 3 heavy grams of water.
That is exactly the mechanism. So let's run the math on your fast.
Let's do it.
You completely deplete your average total capacity of 600 grams of glycogen over 2 days. Because those molecules are being broken apart and burned for energy, the hydrogen bonds are severed.
Water detaches.
Right. The water attached to them is no longer needed. So for those 600 grams of glycogen, you release 1,800 grams of water.
1,800 grams of water leaves the cells, enters the blood, gets filtered by the kidneys, and you literally just urinate it out.
You just flush it away. So the total physical weight loss from the body is the 600 grams of glycogen plus the 1,800 grams of water.
Yielding exactly 2,400 grams, or 2.4 kilograms of lost mass.
Which translates to 5.3 pounds.
5.3 pounds. The course article states this unequivocally, doesn't it?
It does. I have the quote right here. It says, the observable initial weight loss of the first days of fasting does not therefore lead to a sustainable loss of body fat, but is largely due to the emptying of the glycogen stores.
You have simply wrung out the sponge.
You squeezed it dry.
This is a revelation that should completely alter how people view their fitness progress. I mean, think about it. When you start a highly restrictive zero-carb diet or a juice cleanse and you lose 5 pounds by Wednesday,
you feel an incredible surge of motivation.
you think you are burning pure body fat. You think you've cracked the code. But by Saturday, you crack. You break the diet. You go out and eat a large pizza and drink a couple of beers with friends.
And what happens metabolically?
Let's trace it. The disassembly line breaks down the pizza crust and the beer into massive amounts of glucose. The portal vein rushes it to the liver.
The blood sugar spikes.
The pancreas releases a massive flood of insulin.
And the insulin binds to the liver and muscle cells, screaming at them that abundance has finally returned.
And the cells, which have been empty and starved for days, prioritize refilling the pantry immediately.
Over everything else. They pull the glucose out of the blood, synthesize the 600 grams of glycogen, and by the strict laws of chemistry, they pull 1,800 grams of water right back out of your system to hydrate
Oh,
it.
the sponge re-soaks.
Exactly.
You wake up on Sunday morning, you step on the scale, and the 5.3 pounds are entirely back.
And the psychological devastation sets in.
It breaks people. People think, my metabolism is completely broken. I ruined a whole week of hard work in one night. I'm just uniquely genetically cursed. And they abandon the effort entirely.
But the truth is, no fat was gained that night, just as no fat was lost in the first place on Wednesday.
You simply emptied and refilled a biological water tank.
That's it. Understanding this mechanism frees you from the tyranny of daily scale fluctuations. It allows you to focus on actual long-term metabolic health rather than just short-term fluid dynamics.
It really is liberating once you understand the math. But focusing on long-term metabolic health requires us to confront the second half of this source material.
Oh, yes.
Because we have spent this entire time talking about the elegant, beautifully balanced system of glucose metabolism, the pancreas, the brain, the muscles. They all participate in this perfectly regulated dance to keep glucose functioning safely.
It's a great system.
But the disassembly line didn't just produce glucose. It produced two other sugars.
Right. Fructose and galactose.
The sugars that the liver traps at the border checkpoint.
Yeah.
Now, the article notes that while galactose, which comes from lactose in milk, is metabolized similarly to glucose and generally processed without major issue.
Fructose is a completely different story.
A dark story. The text paints a rather alarming picture of what happens when we overwhelm the liver's capacity to handle fructose.
To really grasp the danger here, we have to look at the biochemical pathway again.
Okay, take us down the pathway.
We discussed how glucose enters a cell and undergoes glycolysis, right? And that's controlled by the enzyme hexokinase.
Right, the universal key.
Well, that hexokinase process has built-in feedback loops. It's smart. If the cell already has enough ATP, it essentially turns down the enzymes for glycolysis. It stops pulling in glucose. It regulates itself.
It's like a factory stopping the conveyor belt because the warehouse is full.
Perfect analogy. Fructose does not have that feedback loop.
Wait, no brakes.
No brakes whatsoever. When fructose enters the liver, it is metabolized by that different enzyme, fructokinase.
Right.
Fructokinase does not care how much energy the liver cell already has. It aggressively and rapidly phosphorylates, which means it processes every single molecule of fructose it encounters without any regulation at all.
Just blind processing.
Blind rapid processing. And doing this requires an enormous amount of immediate ATP. The liver cell rapidly depletes its own energy stores just trying to process the incoming wave of fructose.
It literally burns itself out just trying to do the paperwork on the shipment.
That's exactly what it's doing. And as it rapidly burns through that ATP, it produces uric acid as a byproduct.
Which is bad.
Very bad. High uric acid drives systemic inflammation. But the much bigger issue is what happens to the carbon structure of the fructose itself once it's processed.
Where does it go?
Once fructokinase has processed it, it bypasses all the regulatory checkpoints. The liver has to do something with this massive pile of carbon. The text notes that, like glucose, a small amount of fructose can be converted and stored as glycogen.
But wait, we just established that the liver's glycogen pantry is incredibly small. It maxes out at 160 grams.
Exactly. And this is where the modern food environment collides violently with our ancient human anatomy.
How so?
Because for the vast majority of human evolution, encountering high doses of fructose was incredibly rare. Where do we get it?
From seasonal fruits. Or maybe occasional wild honey.
Exactly. A few berries here, a wild apple there. The total dosage of fructose was tiny, and more importantly, it was encased in a dense matrix of cellular fiber.
Right. If you eat a whole apple, your digestive disassembly line has to work really hard to break down the physical structure of the fruit. The fiber slows the extraction process way down.
So the fructose trickles into the portal vein slowly, over hours.
And a slow trickle is easy for the liver to handle, right?
Effortless. It quietly converts that small, steady stream of fructose into glycogen and tucks it away in the 160-gram pantry. The evolutionary system works perfectly.
The modern diet.
The material emphasizes that the modern diet is a completely different beast. We have artificially concentrated fructose to a degree that is biologically unprecedented.
Just pure refined sugar.
Think about household sugar sucrose. It is exactly 50% glucose and 50% fructose. High fructose corn syrup is even more concentrated.
When I drink a massive can of soda, there is no fiber matrix. There is no slow extraction.
It is liquid sugar. The disassembly line instantly absorbs it. Suddenly, you don't have a trickle. You have a tidal wave of 30 or 40 grams of pure fructose hitting the portal vein all at exactly the same moment.
It just slams into the liver.
It slams into it. The liver's fructokinase enzymes go into massive overdrive. The liver's ATP levels crash. And because the modern human is usually not starved,
the 160-gram glycogen pantry is already completely full.
the warehouse is full.
But the unregulated conveyor belt keeps dumping this processed fructose into the facility. So what does the liver do with all of it?
It has no choice but to initiate a process called de novo lipogenesis.
De novo lipogenesis, creating new fat.
Yes, de novo means from scratch. The liver literally takes the carbon backbones of the metabolized fructose, links them together, and manufactures new fat. It creates lipid droplets.
Okay, so it just ships the fat out to the adipose tissue, right?
That's what it tries to do. But because this process is happening so rapidly and so chaotically, right inside the liver tissue, the liver physically can't export the fat fast enough. The transport proteins can't keep up. So the fat droplets begin to accumulate directly inside the hepatocytes, the liver cells themselves.
The liver starts turning into a fatty organ.
Exactly. The material identifies this explicitly. It says, this increased fructose intake leads to increased fat formation in the liver. This is the direct pathogenesis of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD.
This is a staggering concept, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because we traditionally associate liver disease with severe alcoholism, right, where the liver is poisoned by ethanol.
Right.
But here, the liver is being slowly choked by fat droplets simply because it is the only organ capable of dealing with the artificial flood of concentrated fructose that we consume daily.
The rest of the body is totally shielded from the fructose, but the liver bears 100% of the burden.
Wow.
And as the fat accumulates, the liver cells become inflamed, and they become insulin resistant.
Which breaks the whole system.
It really does. Remember, the liver is the central triage hub for your entire metabolism. If the liver becomes sluggish and inflamed, the entire system begins to falter. The liver stops regulating blood sugar effectively, which contributes to systemic insulin resistance across the whole body.
It's a domino effect.
A massive one. The text points to this very clearly, stating that fructose is considered a main cause of NAFD and a major co-cause of obesity, diabetes mellitus, and heart disease.
It really fundamentally changes how we should look at a nutrition label, doesn't it?
Completely.
Because we are trained to look purely at the caloric value of food. We think a calorie is a calorie, just energy in, energy out.
It's the most common advice.
But a calorie of glucose from a complex starch is distributed across your entire body. Every muscle fiber and neuron helps burn it. But a calorie of liquid fructose from a sweetened beverage, that is a highly concentrated metabolic burden dropped squarely onto the shoulders of a single vulnerable organ.
Exactly. Which is why the source material's conclusion regarding healthy aging is so stark.
What does it advise?
It states that a healthy diet should, as far as possible, avoid fructose sources like household sugar and artificially sweetened foods. Aging already naturally decreases the functional capacity of our organs.
So if we spend decades bombarding our liver with concentrated fructose,
Forcing it to constantly undergo de novo lipogenesis, we are actively degrading our primary metabolic engine.
I think we need to draw a very clear line here, though, because the term fructose literally translates to fruit sugar.
It does.
And people hear this terrifying biochemistry, and they immediately panic about eating fruit. The text itself even uses the term fruit sugar. So I have to ask, on behalf of the listener, should we be eliminating fruit from our diets to protect our livers?
The distinction is critical, and it goes right back to the delivery mechanism we discussed.
A fiber matrix.
Exactly. The danger is not the fructose molecule in isolation. The danger is the dosage and the velocity of absorption. When you eat an apple or a bowl of blueberries, you are consuming a relatively small amount of fructose, and it is bound tightly within a complex architecture of water, vitamins, antioxidants, and most importantly, insoluble fiber.
The fiber physically lines the intestine, doesn't it?
It does. It slows down the absorption of the sugars into the blood. It acts as a biological time release mechanism.
And the liver receives that tiny trickle and handles it effortlessly.
Yes, the system works as intended. The pathology of fatty liver disease is driven by volume and speed. It is driven by sucrose added to baked goods, syrups poured over breakfast, and sodas consumed by the liter.
The artificial flood.
Right. The text specifically highlights household sugar and artificially sweetened foods as the vectors of disease, not whole, intact fruits. Eliminating whole fruit based on the fear of fructose is a complete misunderstanding of the biological context.
Context is everything.
Always.
Well, we have covered an immense landscape today. We started all the way at the disassembly line of the digestive tract, watching those complex starches get broken down into glucose, fructose, and galactose.
We followed them right through the portal vein to the liver, where their paths totally diverge.
We saw glucose enter the systemic circulation, acting as the VIP universal fuel. We examined that terrifyingly narrow margin of 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter required to keep the brain functioning, that single teaspoon of sugar.
And the masterful cruise control system of the pancreas, using insulin to store the excess in glucagon to rescue us from the deficits.
We quantified the glycogen pantry at just 600 grams, and we explained the rigid chemistry of water binding, finally debunking that 2.4 kilograms of temporary weight loss you experience during a fast.
The sponge is real.
And lastly, we explored the unregulated metabolism of fructose in the liver, the dangers of de novo lipogenesis, and how artificial liquid sugars drive non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Looking at this entire system holistically, it really presents a fascinating perspective on modern human health.
It does.
We possess an internal metabolic machinery that is incredibly robust. It is highly adaptable, and it evolved to near perfection for the environment of our ancestors.
I mean, it can literally synthesize new sugar from your own muscle just to keep your brain alive.
It can store excess energy perfectly to survive a harsh winter. It's brilliant.
But it is still operating by prehistoric rules.
Exactly. That's the real takeaway here. We have built a modern world flooded with artificially concentrated, refined fructose, a substance our biology simply never anticipated encountering in such massive, rapid doses.
It's an evolutionary blind spot.
We are subjecting an ancient, finely tuned engine to a fuel mixture it was never designed to process. The rising rates of metabolic disease we see today aren't necessarily a failure of our bodies.
What are they then?
They are the result of a profound evolutionary mismatch, a clash between the engineered food environment we've created and the physical biology we inherited.
That is a profound lens through which to view your daily choices. The next time you look at a plate of food, remember that you are not just blindly throwing fuel into a furnace. You are interacting with an incredibly precise, microscopic universe.
The universe that is trying very hard to keep you alive.
Your liver, your pancreas, your brain, they are all waiting for the right materials to keep you thriving. So keep questioning the mechanisms behind what you eat and focus on the biology, not the marketing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.